This meeting is being recorded. Okay, funny story. I am not a person of routine because my days never look the same. Every day is a different adventure. Partially it is the same, but partially not. And you know that recently we changed this class from Wednesday morning to Tuesday evening. One of the reasons I chose Tuesday evening, not only did it work out for some of you, but also turns out Andy's usually out Tuesday, that time of day, with doing childcare and being a great, fantastic bubby to yet another child, not of our family. And I'm alone, and I would eat, and I'd come and do the class. Well, when that little mini routine does get knocked out, something happens. So it turns out this child that she cares for is ill, and Andy didn't go. So we're sitting there eating supper, and I said, you know what I'm going to do is after we eat, and before Marv, I'm going to go take a walk because I need a few thousand more steps. I didn't walk enough today. And she just looks at me, okay, good. And then she said, okay, you have like 10 minutes. I said, what are you talking about? Marv's in an hour and a quarter, hour and 20 minutes. She says, you're teaching tonight. I completely forgot. I mean, I have been teaching for 22 years. I don't think I have ever forgotten a class. Never. So it's because of the little change of the little routine that I have, which was I would be normally eating myself and then coming to do the class. So you are not an afterthought. So,
sounds like it.
So let me tell you what we're doing here, where we're at. When we do the text, we're going to pick it up at paragraph 6. Again, we're in essay number 5, paragraph 6, but we're not there yet. To give you a little summary where we're holding, an introduction from Aviner and what's going to happen here. Okay. We're in the middle of this. It sounds like we're back at the beginning of the book again, which we are not, which has to do with the differences between the philosopher's approach to the existence of God and how God works in the world versus the Jewish approach. We haven't really talked yet too much about the Jewish approach, which we will tonight. And the philosopher approach is more of bottom up. You see something, you believe, you go up, and you work backwards to some form of a creator. What we're going to discuss tonight has a lot to do with this topic of existence of Hashem, how Hashem runs the world. The major difference between the philosophical approach and the Jewish approach is the concept of mikre. Mikre means just happenstance. Things just happen, which we're going to see, versus that there's a creator, but not only creator, but one who is constantly renewing the world and is involved in the world. We're going to start off with a slide from the book from Rabbi Aviner. Okay, it's actually hey, good. I'll make this a little bit bigger so you can actually see it better. Bring it over the whole screen. Okay. No. Ha. Wait, sorry. I'm going to add it. I'm going to bring an additional slide in here that it's not this. That wasn't it. Hold on one second. Group. What? Hold on. Oh, it is what I want. Never mind. Oh, Lord. Hi, my name is Zev Shandel. I'll be teaching Kuzari. Okay, let's start. Like I say, here's the slide I wanted to start with. Tov, lisikum. In summary, now before this, we talked about this concept, this hiuli, this concept of energy, and how there was the rings that were around the moon and the rings that or further out in celestial bodies, and that gave the concept that brought about fire, and that farther away you were, there was going to be the earth, physically meaning the dirt and earth. Okay, that was what we saw. Lisikum. Kuzari ratza lehidamot lefilosof. The king was trying to be like the philosopher, compare himself to the philosopher, be like him, to recognize God and his actions by starting off from this world and working his way upwards, so to speak, to God. Histaklut beolamenu hanamuch vakatan, while looking upon our world, this small and little, the short, the little world, by in-depth look at it, And from there to get to the recognition of God. Aval, ein zo derech idealit. This is not the ideal path or way. It's much better to start off with the recognition of the existence of Hashem and work your way down to this world. He's going to explain, and we'll see this also in the continuation. Al kain, therefore, the Vilna Gaon said, required people to learn the Kuzari as one of the basic books of Emunah that we have. Bimkom Shar HaYichud v'Ha'emunah b'Sefer Chovot HaLevavot Rabbeinu Bachya. Now you may be familiar with this book. Chovot HaLevavot in English is known as Duties of the Heart, written by Bachya ibn Pakud. And he says that it's more important, this is the Vilna Gaon was talking, to learn the Kuzari than to learn the first chapter. By the way, the first chapter is very difficult, of Shar HaYichud, Emunah, and Chovot HaLevavot. Why? Because the Shar HaYichud, the approach of Bachya ibn Pakud, was the recognition of God in this world, through this world. But we don't want an intermediary. We want to start with Hashem. We don't want to start because of this and there because of this and because of this. Oh, then there must be a Ribono Shel Olam. That we don't want this middleman. We don't want an agent. What do we want? We want to start with the light of God. We don't need to prove anything. Remember, one of the things we discussed a while ago was what is the translation of the word belief or faith? It cannot include something that is provable physical. You can't prove it because then it's not faith. It's just knowledge. For example, I cannot say, I believe with perfect faith that this is a cup of water, because it is. It doesn't require any faith. We already met God. I don't have to prove that I live. If I can't prove to you that I'm alive, am I not alive? Meaning, let's assume for a moment, let's go back 500 years. Person hears that Mr. So-and-so passed away. And there's no way for me to prove this guy 8,000 miles away that I am alive. Does that mean I'm not alive just because I can't prove it? Of course not. And the other perspective is, do I need to prove to you? You hear me speaking. Do I need to prove to you I'm alive? I cling to God. And by clinging to Hashem, faith in Hashem, belief in Hashem, I don't need any way to prove anything. First of all, I meet God, so to speak. I interact with God 3 times a day in prayer. And my goal, when I say my, I mean our goal, is to place God before me at all times. I'm going to come back to a couple of these statements, but right now, just let me read the rest of this paragraph. Whoever lives with the perspective or at the level of those who cling to God are alive, they don't need to stand there and look for proofs of God's existence, nor for needing for proof of his hashgacha, his watching over the world. This is beyond any kind of proof. It is a fact in our lives. Do you ever say to yourself, well, if I can't really prove that God exists because I can't really see God in this world, I'm not going to believe in him. And he is way above and beyond any private life of mine. Because my life is and then will pass. We have to remember, we are made up of 2 things, a physical body and a spiritual part. That spiritual part, which we know is called a chelek eloka mima'al, which we will talk about at length when we begin Tanya, Bezrat Hashem, in a number of months, that we are part of God, is nitzchi. It's eternal. And for how much more so the existence of God himself, that existence is forever. Last sentence, and I'm going to go back on a couple points. We are now going to invite the philosopher into the hall, lilmod, to learn ketzad nifgashim im ribono shel olam lo derech haolam ela beofen yashir kanal. We're going to now invite the philosopher to have a different perspective. And when he's saying that, he doesn't mean just the philosopher. He means you and me. We're going to have a very, very different perspective. Instead of all this happenstance and this Hugh Lee and the things just happen to come into existence. And then when we finally see these things, then there had to be something working up the food chain, so to speak. There was something on top. He said, we're going to put that off to the side. We're going to have a different perspective. I want to talk about a couple of things that were in this paragraph. For those of you who are familiar with Schrodinger's cat, anyone familiar with that? Okay, yes, at least one. Okay. I'm not going to get into it, but it's kind of reminiscent a little bit of Schrodinger's cat, which is the idea of never mind. I'm not going to talk about the experiment, but it's a little bit reminiscent. It's too much to talk about. It's fascinating, but it's too much to talk about right now. But it is something that is reminiscent in here. But I want to mention one thing here, which has to this a couple of psukim quotes. One is Vatem advekim b'Hashem Elokechem Chayim kulchem hayom. Those of you who cling to God, all of you are living today. And this idea here of Shiviti Hashem v'nagdi tamid. What is Shiviti Hashem v'nagdi tamid? Literally means I will place God before me at all times. If you are quick, you'll notice, and even though here there's a daled for Shem Hashem, Hashem's name in that pasuk is spelled Yud Ke Vav Ke. The initial letters of that pasuk then are Shin, Yud, Lamed, Taf. Shilat. You know, Tzomet Shilat near Chashmonaim is named for Shilat, probably in the, I don't know for sure, but it's the same word in the Talmud. And it says the Rav Shilat in the Talmud was called that because he walked around all day going like this with his fingers, with a Shin, Yud, Lamed, Taf. He'd write it out. He'd write Shiviti Hashem Nagdi Tamid, Shiviti Hashem Nagdi Tamid. What does it mean though? Tachlis. I place God before me at all times. It's a very nice statement. Very nice. What does it mean, though? There is a famous story in the Gemara, mentioned in more, I believe, more than one place, about Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was ill. He was lying on his deathbed. And his students came to him. They're very upset. They're coming to separate from their teacher. And they said to him, Rabbeinu Barchenu, please, our teacher, bless us. And he responds by saying, May the fear of Hashem be upon you, like the fear of humans. And they said, Ad Kan, that's the big bracha you're giving us? That we should be afraid of God like we're afraid of humans? And he responded, Halvai, if only. And he explains, when a person goes to steal something, they don't say, I hope God doesn't see me. They say, I hope a person doesn't see me. If only we would have the realization that God is always present and sees everything we're doing, we wouldn't be doing it. Shiviti Hashem nagdi tamid. Therefore, when a person lives by that for real, and they always imagine the presence of God, that they're in the presence of Hashem, then they're able to affect how they act in this world. What does it mean, lidabek b'kadosh baruch hu? Atem advekim b'Hashem Elokechem. So the Gemara asked the following question: I mean, could you attach yourself to fire? We say it says Hashem is an esh ochla. Hashem is an all-consuming fire, but it means lihidamot lakadosh baruch hu. Means to be like Hashem, mahu afata. Just like He has rachamim, just like He is merciful, you should be merciful. Just like Hashem visits the sick, you should visit the sick. So we combine all these into one unit, and we say when we live our lives the way Hashem wants us to, being mindful of the fact that He's constantly sitting there with His eye on us, Hinei lo yanum velo yishan, Shomer Yisrael, Hashem is always watchful. It affects how we live our lives. Now, if God is completely disjointed, He created the world. Even the philosophers will say He created the world, but what's He been doing since then? Nothing. He has nothing. There's no involvement of God in the philosophical world, in which we're going to see in a moment, but rather he just kind of, okay, the world's just going to go on its merry way, doing whatever it does. But we have the exact opposite approach. And that exact opposite approach is not only did Hashem create the world, not only did everything not just happen by happenstance, but Hashem is constantly involved in the world and what's going on as well. Now let's take a look at the text. We're going to look at paragraph Hey. I'm sorry, it was not Vav, but Hey, number 5. I may have told you 6 before. So go to paragraph 5, please. Okay. Amar Kuzari. So the king now says to the Rav, Zoti ha'emunah kasher yachricheu hechreach ha'sechel lahodot bechazeh u'ma hitzrichanu lomar b'mikre. So this kind of proof that we bring or can bring someone to a true level of emunah when you're pushed to really believe something. Because based on the idea of belief, how can you believe anything is just happenstance? We're going to see what this means in a minute. Velama lo nomar, and why wouldn't we just say, ki asher sam ze sus v'ze enosh bechochma, just like something that was made, an animal, a horse, and one thing was a human with chochma, with wisdom. Asher lo nasig anachnu hafradato, it's a wisdom that we cannot fathom. Hu asher sam ha'esh, esh, he's the one that made fire, fire. Ve'aretz, aretz, and the earth, earth. Lechochma shera'a ota itbarach, lo b'mikre mikirvat ha'galgal o mimerchako. Here, the king completely dismisses the original thing that we said in the name of the philosophers. The philosophers said that we start with a nucleus, and that nucleus, let's just say, was the moon or some other spheres in the heavens, and that it gave off energy, this hiyuli. And that energy just happened to, as it went further and further away from its source, became different things. It just happened to devolve into fire, devolve into water, devolve into air, devolve into earth. It just happened like that. But he said, when you start to listen to what the Rav is saying, and you start to realize the chokhmah, the complete wisdom of how the world was created and continues to run itself, you cannot accept the idea or the doctrine that everything is mikre. Everything just happened by chance. And you cannot accept that based on the closeness or farthestness, what's the word? The closeness and the whatever distance that something might be from that nucleus of energy is going to cause things in just by mikre to have occurred. So what's he saying? I made a comment to you once, and I haven't really seen it. Someone told me it's in the Kuzari. I have not seen it, but it fits in right here. Is that to believe that things happen just by chance? I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago also. I think that things just happen by chance in creation, in the world, is no different than believing I can put a ball of thread in a closet, close the door, and come back 1,000 years later and find a suit hanging on a hanger. Makes no sense. Where we're going with this, I'm going to see a slide in a second also. Where we're going with this is that the king is starting to understand that we cannot accept the philosophical approach of mikre. We cannot accept that at all. And therefore, instead of working our way from down up, we're going to have to, as the rabbi is going to do, start from the top, Hashem, down. Let's take a look at one more slide. Okay. It's actually going to be 2 slides. Hapilasov maskim. The philosopher agrees that there in fact is a chain of events of physical things that happen in the creation, in the world. That on the one hand, the philosopher agrees that yes, there had to be a creator, an original creator that brought everything physical into existence, but that God is not the be all and end all and the one who overwatches everything individual, from the perspective that we have, which is Vatamechayet Kulam, God gives life to everything. B'chol rega v'rega, in every moment. And the bria pa'am achat. Again, I mentioned this verbally before, that they believe that the world was created once. Vazivat haolam lechazdei chukei hatava. And then Hashem said, okay, look, I put into the world laws of nature. Literally, let nature take its course. Lehitnahel v'kochot atzmo, to run itself with its own power, kibiyachol. Zeu chiluk atzum. This is a massive difference between the approach of philosophy and our approach. This is exactly what the king is looking for. What? Et ribono shel olam haprati shel kol adam ve'adam. He is looking for what you and I are looking for, which is the Hashem, the individual relationship that Hashem has with every individual, every person. Ribono shel olam shemakir be'orech intimi kol echad ve'echad umdaber elav b'chalom. A God who recognizes every individual intimately, who speaks to him in dreams. We'll see what this means in a minute. Lo ribono shel olam klali, not the general Hashem, meaning we know that Hashem runs everything in the universe, but there's also this personal relationship that we have with Hashem. That's what we're talking about now. Hamagagel manganon adir b'shelet rachok. Elokim shel Aristo hu Elokim klali. The God, the way this is described by Aristotle, is the quote generic Hashem. Hayoshev lo be'ezeh cheder bikra, who's sitting in some waiting room. Velochet al kaftorim, he's pushing buttons. Hakvuim beluach hanak, they're set up on some big giant board. Afuf shi'amun. It's just shrouded. It's boring. Omnam shlitato mushlemet, whereas even though God's rule is perfect, kol poel b'tzura nifla'a bichlal, it just generally happens. Ach beprati hamarechet. God may be interested in how, making sure the planets rotate properly and that the sun rises when it's supposed to and the trees grow. But as far as like individual things, an individual person and day-to-day life, Hashem has nothing to do with that. That's their claim. Now, before we look at this next part of the paragraph, you'll notice the title, Elokeinu v'Elokei Avotenu. I mentioned this before at least 2 or 3 times. I'm going to mention it again because it fits. Beginning of every single Shmoneh Esrei, we say every single day, no matter if it's Yom Kippur or if it's a Tuesday evening for Mariv or Mincha, which I know Michael, you have to go in a little bit.
9 minutes.
Okay, I'll keep my eye on the clock for you.
I'm doing the same, but on another screen.
Okay, we start on Baruch Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avotenu, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. When you stop to think about it, it's wordy, it's verbose, it's extra. Listen to what we say. Elokeinu, our God, V'Elokei Avotenu, the God of our fathers, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. We make multiple references to God. We could have just said Elokeinu, V'Elokei Avotenu, okay, our God and the God of our fathers. Or if we really wanted to put the names of the Avot, it could have been Elokeinu, V'Elokei Avraham, Yitzchak, V'Yaakov. Why all this Elokeinu, 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 Elokeinu? Because if you think about it, it's trying to tell us something critically important. Number one, we acknowledge Hashem is the God of everything. It's Elokeinu. No matter who's saying the words, it's Elokeinu. Number two, this isn't in a vacuum. We also acknowledge that he was Hashem, the Elokei of the Elokim of the Avot, the God of the Avot. But instead of saying Avraham, Yitzchak, V'Yaakov, it says Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. Because Hashem had an individual relationship with every single one of the Avot. And if he had a relationship with every single one of the Avot, we mention it because as we start at the beginning of Shmoneh Esrei, we're also acknowledging that we too have this individual, the ability for this individual relationship with Hashem. And that's what this is about here. Take a look at this paragraph. As opposed to the perspective of philosophers that the God is the one pushing all the buttons in heaven for the giant big picture, but doesn't care about the small picture. The God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, our Hashem, how we know him, is Hashem dealing with the individual, singular individual. Of course, he's the one running the whole show. But in addition to that, very often I'll try to compare it to the political world, lahavdil, like let's just forget Israel. I don't want to talk Israel politics, and I'm not talking American politics for sure, not even more so. Let's say we're talking, it's Australia. Australia has a prime minister, right? Yes. Yes. I forgot her name, but yes. Okay. So she's part of the British Commonwealth. So the prime minister, obviously has certain responsibilities. The prime minister's responsibilities, the higher up the food chain you are, so to speak, in the business world, in politics, in the political world, the less small ticket items you're responsible for. You think about that, right? Because the president of the company is not going to be involved in a dispute whether the worker on the line punched in 7 minutes late and he's going to be docked 15 minutes of pay. He doesn't get involved in that. So he's more the klali. Who's the prati? The boss. The individual relationship is the boss. The guy who this poor little slob who came in late reports to. So he's that. But Hashem is both. Now, going away from that mashal, from the parable, Hashem is the klali. Hashem runs everything, but also with every one of you listening to me, whoever might listen to this video, the 2 or 3 people in the world, is Hashem has an individual relationship with everybody, and that we already acknowledged in the beginning of Shemon Esrei. Hu sholeach le'adam ha'prati chalom u'medaber imo. Sometimes Hashem even sends us messages through dreams. Now, for those of you who live here, who had, you know that I didn't because of Corona the last couple of years, but I would give in the winter a series of 3 shiurim on topics that are a little unusual, I hope. 3 years ago was on one of the series was on dreams and what we learn from dreams and how they actually have sometimes halachic implications. But right now we're going to see, let me read through this and I'm going to come back to the idea of dreams and messages. Let's just hear what he has to say. Katva Torah, Vaikra el Moshe. The Torah says, and he called to Moshe, Lashon Chibat, as Rashi says, he spoke to him in a language of love, a loving language. God doesn't just have this booming voice going out some abstract way into the world, into space. Whoever wants to hear will hear. When Hashem wanted to speak to Moshe, he talked to him personally. Kan binkomenu, b'tiachasut shel chiba miyuchedet klapav. He related to Moshe out of love. V'omnam harotzel lakshiv yachol lakshiv. If someone else was around and wanted to hear, he could hear. Ela oznot tzricha lesagel regishut nevuit im birtzono lishma. But he, the person who was nearby, would have to adapt his sensitivity, his prophetic sensitivity to be actually able to hear. But no one would get to the level of Moshe, obviously. Any prophecy that Hashem would give to a prophet, all the other, the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us that all other Nevi'im who were alive at that time heard the same prophecy. But they knew that this particular nevuah or prophecy was meant for a specific one of the prophets. Amazing. I know, it's unbelievable. Anytime Hashem called someone in the Torah by name twice, Lashon Chiba, who is also a form of love. For example, Avraham, Yaakov. Philosopher has no clue at this. Now, let's talk for a minute. Let me take this off a screen share. Let's talk for a minute. What's going on here? Hashem Klali, the general, running of everything. Hashem is the Hashem Prati, the individual one-on-one relationship that we have with Hashem. But it's even more so. We tend to think that our communication with God is unilateral. We communicate with Hashem. We daven to Hashem, we cry out to Hashem, we ask Hashem for help, we ask Hashem for a parking place, we ask Hashem for a job, for a shidduch, for parnasa, right? It's we ask, we talk, we ask, we talk, we thank, we give, we talk. That's one way. What's this Gemara telling us that he's quoting in it's actually not a Gemara, it's his opinion based on a Gemara, that Hashem is always also responding to us. We're getting messages. I've mentioned many, many, many times over the years in many classes, a book called Listen to Your Messages. What is Listen to Your Messages? It's a book based on a Gemara. The Gemara tells us that if a person is walking in the shuk, doesn't have to be shuk Machane Yehuda or shuk HaKarmel, any shuk, Person's walking in a marketplace and trying to determine, think, should I do this or should I not do this? And they're deep in thought. And they hear, the story of the Gemara is that they hear a woman calling out at her child, no, that should be can be taken as a sign of a message from Hashem, that Hashem is telling you the answer is no to your thought, whether you should or shouldn't do something. Is that always true? Of course not. But what does he say? What is Rav Aviner saying here is that we need to be in tune with what's going on around us. We need to open our ears, our minds, and our hearts. Sometimes,
I have to go.
Okay, be well. Davin well, say hi to Hashem for us. Davin, pray for my soul. Take all the prayers I can. When we open our eyes and our minds and our hearts, it's unbelievable what we start to hear. We can get a message through a dream. We can get a message through a person saying something to us. We can get a message by just observing things. And that's one of the things that shows that we acknowledge that Hashem has this relationship with us one-on-one. Going back to the parable of the CEO, let's say, of a company, of a Fortune 500 company, there's 10,000 employees. The CEO isn't coming down into the grunt line to the line workers and telling them, look, the collar on your shirt's a little too big. I know you said you needed a new one. Come on, I'll get the seamstress to fix it for you. I guess that's not politically correct anymore to say seamstress. The individual, the humanoid that's going to sew that and we'll fix that for you. That's not going to happen. But if it did, what would it say about the CEO? That he cares not only about the bottom line profit, not just how the company's running, not just about the big year-end of parties for Christmas, but he also cares about the individual line worker, and not only cares about them, hears their needs and tends to them. What would that tell you about what would it show you about that individual, that CEO? Wow, he's like such a caring, kind, compassionate individual. And that's the approach the Rav is trying to impart on the king. Let's take a look now at paragraph. No. Let me see. I want to do this. I'm going to skip this another slide. I'm going to skip it. I'm just going to tell you one thing that was in it. Actually, no, I'll show you just one part of that slide. Because I'm going to skip most of it, but I want to go down to one thing. Oops. Where is this? This is the one that starts by Yom Hashanah from. Oh, did I not post it? Interesting. That's the next. Oh, that's that. Sorry. Hang in there. Oh, here it is. Okay. I want you to take a look at this last paragraph here. I'm going to read it, explain it, and talk about this Gemara for a minute too. Why do we need to go on this long road? Even the philosopher admits that the initial cause of everything is God. And he's the one that instituted the whole concept of laws of nature. So let's go the short way. He is the one who is responsible for establishing the laws of nature. And they are not in charge of themselves, meaning they do not. A tree doesn't just decide one day to become a zebra. And a zebra doesn't one day just decide it wants to play baseball and walk on its back legs. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, I'm going to read this, translate it, and tell you the background. Mishamar l'shemen vidalek, the one who said to the oil to light, to become combustible, uyomar l'chometz vidalek, shall say also to the vinegar that it should light. Okay, what is going on here? Okay, I gotta move this back and sit back. There's a story in the Gemara in Tanit. I don't remember the names, the exact circumstances, but a woman discovered just shortly before Shabbat that she had no oil in the house, and instead had thought what she thought was oil was vinegar, and she wanted to light her Shabbat candles. Or maybe it was Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa's wife. That's what it must have been. And she was distraught. She had no oil. It's candle lighting time. And he said that the very same being, i.e. God, who created oil to be combustible and vinegar, which is not, can command vinegar to light and become combustible. She lit them and they lit as Shabbat candles when they were vinegar. What's the point of the story in there? If I were to ask you, why, if I take water and oil and put them in a jar, in a bottle, why does the oil float to the top? So you'll give me scientific answers. It has to do with viscosity. It has to do with this, what's called the something weight. What's the word? The specific gravity, not weight, the specific gravity. It has to do with a whole bunch of things. That's the scientific why. It doesn't answer a bigger question of how come. Now, you can tell me why oil and water don't mix, but you can't tell me how come they don't. They don't because that's what Hashem wants. The fact that oil burns by putting a wick inside of it is because that's what Hashem wants. The fact that if I stick a wick in water and I light it, or I stick it in vinegar and I light it and it doesn't light, that's what Hashem wants. So therefore, when Hashem is the creator decides for a moment, for whatever reason, that water or that vinegar will light, it will. Therefore, what's the point? That we cannot accept that things just happen. There are certain laws in nature, but since Hashem is the one who enacted those laws, Hashem is the one who can change them. Anytime there's a miracle that we see in Tanakh, it's Hashem, I shouldn't say anytime, majority of the time, it's Hashem working within the laws of nature, making changes such as the water that's supposed to be flat or find its lowest level, seeks its lowest level, like Kriyat Yam Suf, the water stands, and on and on and on. And donkey talks when it's going to be Bilam in a couple more weeks. We're in Shlach this week. Korach Hukat Balak. We got 3 more weeks, and we have the story of the Bilam, of the talking donkey. Why did that happen? Because Hashem wanted it to happen. And that's the approach right now that we have to start working with and looking at the idea that Hashem is not only the creator, Hashem is not only the cause of everything, but he's involved in all the details. Now, that does do is it begs a question, which is not dealt with here, which I'm going to deal with just for a couple of minutes. And that is what we talk about is called Hashgacha Pratit. What is Hashgacha Pratit, or also known as Hashgacha Pratis, which means personal watching, personal care on behalf of Hashem. If I am walking down the street and there's something that I start to trip on, this happened to me just a couple of days ago, and I kind of hit my foot on something, and I kind of almost fall, and I don't, that's not just because it happened that I didn't fall. It's because for whatever reason, Hashem knew and felt I did not need to fall on my face at that moment. And therefore, even though by accident I tripped on that stone, then Hashem stopped it from hurting me. Now, how do I know that? Well, we kind of say it every single day. What do we say Hashem is? Melech, Ozer, Umoshia. Hashem is the one who is the king, who is Ozer, he helps. Melech, Ozer, Umoshia, he saves, Umagen, and he protects. They all sound like similar words, but they're all different stages. Ozer could mean, I fell in a puddle, Hashem helps me get out. Moshia, I fell in the puddle, I can't move, someone else comes along and helps pull me out. Magen, protect, means that I don't even step in the puddle in the first place. So Hashem is involved in every aspect. So that's called Hashgacha Pratit. So if that's the case, and also we have what's called free choice. Well, if I have free choice, Bechira Chofshit, we have to figure out how does Bechira Chofshit, i.e. free choice, and Hashgacha Pratit, Hashem's individual watching over us, how do they mesh along with the idea of what's called in Yiddish bashert, or determination. And finally, we have what's called Hashgacha Klalit. What's Hashgacha Klalit? There is nothing to stop me right now from going to the kitchen, taking a knife, going outside, God forbid, and stabbing somebody. There's nothing to stop me if I want to do it. There's no master plan right now that says Zev Shanel cannot go out and do that unless part of Hashem's bigger plan is that I need to do something and I have to be not in jail, or that person I'm about to stab is also part of a bigger master plan, and that person can't get stabbed for whatever reason. But if Hashem's chess pieces, so to speak, are the game, I use that term loosely now, obviously, do not need me or her or him to be in a certain place at a certain time, and whatever happens is going to happen. Hashgacha klalit means that Hashem, no matter what, we've seen this in Navi, for those of you who've been in the Navi class, that we've seen multiple times, Hashem will allow an individual to do what he wants, unless it goes against his master plan. But when it comes to Am Yisrael, to the whole nation, we don't have Bechira Chavshit in a sense. We are working with Hashem's moving Am Yisrael around as necessary. Let me just see something here in the book. I'm going to read one more paragraph. That's all. One more paragraph and make a comment. That's all we're going to do. So I'm going to read paragraph Vav number 6. Amar Chaver. So the Rav said, V'zoti atana haToriyah. He said, Boker Tov, my dear king, what you're saying is a Torah perspective. Umofta b'nei Israel, and the wonder of the b'nei Israel is Uma shofech lehem min ha'atzamim, uma shenivra lehem min ha'havayot. What do we see? What kind of proofs do we have about with Am Yisrael and Hashem's connection? How certain things transform themselves. For example, what transformed itself in the beginning of Sefer Shemot? A stick became a snake became a stick, or certain things were created that didn't exist, such as the man from heaven, right? I like the cat that's all over you there. That's so funny, trying to keep away from the baby. Yes, it's
crazy.
You got the trying to keep the baby asleep. The cat's okay.
There's other animals too.
No, really?
It's not my house.
That's funny. Sorry, 1 second. וכאשר יסתלק המופת הזה, ישתווה עמך טוען עליך בדלית. When you, without any proof like that, there is no benefit to say, or you have no advantage, so to speak, over those who say that everything happens by happenstance. Meaning, if we didn't have these signs from Hashem, then we might be able to say, okay, maybe everything is just mikri, maybe everything just happens. And for example, grapes that grew over here just happened to grow because some seeds fell there. And the shape, the form of that seed, and because why the seed become a seed, or the grape become a grape, just because of the way the celestial spheres were spinning and just happened to cause that. And it caused whatever, it became a grape because of some spherical movements in the heavens. He says, and I'm adding to him, he says, do you hear what you're saying even? You hear what you're even saying? It makes absolutely no sense. It's nonsensical. I'm going to read something to you that I don't have a slide for. The Rav adds another level of question on the approach of the philosopher, who proves the existence of God through nature. The philosopher works at looking at the world, and through that proves about God. Hine, tamid nu chaliton, ki ilan ze nifla lo bizchut shekach bera'o haborei, el siba mikrit hi shesiba hazot. I could just say, you know why there's a tree here? Not because of God. Just so happens a tree grew here. Tziruf mikrim, a whole amalgam of different events. Va'afki zed davar nadir, even though it's rare, it could happen. If I see a tree in the Vadi, could it have just happened to grow there? Yeah, maybe. Once I open myself up to say that it's possible that a tree that grew over there was just by happenstance and not because God wanted it, then I'm already opening myself up to problems in Hashem's connection to the world. So if I'm working from the bottom up and I have a safek, I have a doubt about the bottom, how can I come to the recognition of Hashem? Okay, there's a lot of heavy stuff here. It's going to get, I hope it was interesting. There's more interesting stuff coming up. Again, we're going to talk about self-determination and free choice and other things like that. But I need to make sure is very clear to everybody is where we're going with this. And that is that as opposed to, remember, this all started with the Kuzari, the king, saying, I want to know more stuff. I want to know about more about Emunah and Hashem and existence of Hashem. And he starts off here by dismissing the approach of the philosophers, which is again the bottom up perspective, as opposed to trickle down in economics from Reagan. From the idea of going from the idea of the existence of Hashem to start with that, working its way down into the world. So to Emunah, I will say have a good afternoon and hope the baby sleeps well. To the Schreibens, you're welcome. To the Schreibens, I'll say have a safe trip back home. All should go well. And to myself, I'll say Laila Tov. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.